This is Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. It's in the Fenway neighborhood of Boston, Massachusetts. In December 2024 and January 2025, the museum features a festive holiday courtyard flooded with dark forest greens and shades of red and silver around its Medusa mosaic floors. I'm pretty sure this is the museum's annual tradition. After all, the courtyard was the main star of the unveiling party back in the new year of 1903. The museum itself was opened to the public on February 23rd, 1903. This place is by far the most romantic place I've ever been to. I also noticed that the art pieces were assembled in such a way that they tell Isabella's personal stories. My first visit many years ago led me to an attempt to get to know Isabella and how she built her museum. So I did a little research and would like to share what I learned about her, her museum, and last but not least, the notorious heist. Isabella lived during the period known as the Gilded Age, a period that glittering on the surface but corrupt underneath. Mark Twain referred to the late 19th century when he coined the term Gilded Age. Isabella was born in New York City. Her parents came from well-to-do families. David Stewart, a second-generation Scots American, and his wife Adelia Smith. Isabella believed she was a direct descendant of Mary, Queen of Scots, from her father's side of the family. Her official birth date was April 14, 1840. Let's talk about her family and how she got the idea of building her own palace. Isabella's grandmother acquired 10 acres of farmland in rural Jamaica, Long Island, when her husband John Stewart, who was a merchant, died in 1805 and left her with an inheritance of $75,000. Then she gradually bought more and more land. Her father David had a different interest in mind and left his mother's farm for Manhattan. He started to work as a sales clerk, then established his own firm, trading mostly in Irish and Scottish linens. He then married Adelia and had 4 children together. Isabella was the firstborn of the 4 siblings. The couple hired private tutors to educate their children and sent them to private schools. In 1856, the Stewarts took Isabella and her brother David on an extended business trip in Europe. They're trying to cope with the sudden loss of her younger sister Adelia the prior year. The youngest one, James, wasn't even born yet at the time. As they traveled from one place to another, Isabella kept a meticulous track of her experience. In the fall of that year, they arrived in Paris, and Isabella enrolled in a Protestant boarding school to continue her education. That's where she met Julia Gardner of Boston. Two years later, the Stewart family continued their travel to Italy, then returned to New York. The private museums in Milan must have left a wonderful memory in Isabella's mind. They gave her an idea to build her own private museum. A few years later, in the winter of 1859, Isabella took her first trip to Boston to reunite with her best friend Julia Gardner. During this visit, Isabella grew closer to Julia's older brother Jack. They got engaged pretty soon after. They got married in the spring of 1860. Her father bought a property at 152 Beacon Street as a wedding present. They lived at Jack's father's house while they're building their new home. 2 years after their wedding, their son Jackie was born. Sadly, Jackie died before his 2nd birthday. Isabella suffered a miscarriage after that. She had suffered one before Jackie was born. These took a toll on her. Her doctor suggested world travel to cope with her depression. She took one and kept a meticulous travel diary. Let's change the subject and talk about this room. This is the Dutch room. In March of 1990, a couple of men in police uniforms managed to steal 13 artworks from the museum, 6 of them from the Dutch room. Their empty frames are still left hanging in this room. I put the link to the missing art pieces in the description below. Up to now, the heist is still under investigation, and the museum is offering a $10 million reward for any information leading directly to the safe return of the stolen works. You never know. Maybe you found the missing pieces in a yard sale or something. Now back to the story of her travel. Her travel diaries will later become the guide to build her own museum and art collections. The couple kept furnishing their new home with their travel treasures. In the meantime, the Gardner family business flourished under the lead of her father-in-law, John Gardner Sr. To say that he had the Midas touch would be an understatement. After the Civil War, John Gardner Sr. moved his interest from merchant ship to investing in mining and railroads. The family also owned numerous properties throughout the city. In November of 1872, the Great Boston Fire engulfed a dry goods store at 83 to 85 Summer Street, then spread rapidly across downtown Boston. Miraculously, the devastating fire didn't harm any of the family's property. Soon after, Gardner Sr. quickly invested in an insurance company. By the 1880s, their Boston real estate investment would be worth over $5 million. That probably helped to support Isabella's long life mission. She ventured to collect artworks from around the world and share them with the public. Together with an aspiring young writer, Bernard Berenson, they would build one of the country's most impressive art collections. In 1897, Jack and Isabella started to plan for a new place to house their ever-growing art collection. At about the same time, their Brookline neighbor, Frederick Law Olmsted, was in the middle of implementing his landscape design for a new-filled marshland south of the Back Bay known as the Emerald Necklace. Pretty sure they thought about building a new place there. But before they're able to go forward with the plan, Jack Gardner suffered a stroke on December 10, 1898. Sadly, he didn't survive the ordeal. Earlier that year, Jack had appointed his nephew, George Peabody Gardner, as a trustee of the estate, but he gave Isabella access to one of his two trusts. Another major event also happened to Jack earlier that year. He never finished his study at Harvard. He quit college to help with his family business. Harvard College finally awarded him an honorary degree. Just a few weeks after Jack's untimely death, Isabella quietly closed on her plot of land in Fenway in January of 1899. She informed architect Willard T. Sears to alter the building design. Originally, she had planned to purchase some neighboring property to expand her 152 Beacon Street home. However, Jack had a second thought about building a museum in the middle of a residential neighborhood, not to mention the likelihood of losing the art collection to another fire. On this new plot of land, she started to materialize her vision to build an inside-out Palazzo Barbaro, a Venetian palace, for her museum. In 1888, John Singer Sargent painted a controversial painting of Isabella right there. She had to keep it hidden from the public until after her husband's death. Now it's proudly displayed in her gallery. The construction of this house museum was completed in 1901. She moved into the fourth floor private living quarters. At last, her lifelong dream has come along. The museum held a grand opening celebration on January 1st of 1903, featuring the Boston Symphony Orchestra for the dramatic unveiling of the interior courtyard garden. Then about a month later, it opened to the public. But due to damage and thefts of small items, Isabella changed her mind and decided to only allow art students in her museum. In my opinion, she had led an amazing life, somewhat radical while still being religious. Isabella succumbed to a stroke in 1924. She stipulated in her will that nothing in the galleries should be changed and no items be acquired or sold from the collection. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you and see you in the next one.